Welcome to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm Jack Hagel. North Carolina's new congressional districts have made it through the state legislature and now into the courtroom. The new map was approved Wednesday. It gives Republicans an edge in 11 of the state's 14 congressional districts. The same day it was approved, anti-gerrymandering groups and social justice groups threatened lawsuits, and the next day they started to trickle in. WRAL state government reporter Will Doran was at the legislature all week, and he's been covering the aftermath. He joins us now to break it all down. Will, good to see you.
Nice to talk to you, Jack.
Well, this was quite a week. Real quick, though, for those who haven't been keeping score each day, just give us the high-level overview of the redistricting effort, what happened in terms of the approvals.
Sure. So this is part of a national push. President Donald Trump has asked Republican states to do exactly what we're doing here in North Carolina, to draw the maps, to kick as many Democrats as they can out of power in the U.S. House of Representatives ahead of the 2026 midterms, when Democrats had been projected to win a decent number of seats. And so, we've seen this effort in Texas, in Missouri. There's some other states in addition to North Carolina that are talking about doing this, but it's just this national effort. And we didn't redraw our entire map here in North Carolina. As you mentioned, we have 14 districts. This new map only touches 2 of them, and that's in large part because the state legislature already redistricted it back in 2023. So it's not exactly ancient history that they last got the chance to draw the map how they wanted it, but they thought that maybe they could squeeze out just a little bit more power, and that is what they have done here by turning basically our only competitive seat for a U.S. House district into one that will favor Republicans in the future.
And Democrats aren't just projected to win a few seats. They were projected to win enough seats to take over the majority in the House of Representatives, right?
Exactly, and that's why there's so much pressure on this, because if Democrats do take back that majority in the U.S. House, they can not only block all of President Trump's legislative policies and priorities, but they could also potentially impeach him for a third time.
Now, on Wednesday, they were approved, and soon thereafter, these social justice groups started threatening lawsuits. And then on Thursday, they held a rally. They elaborated on their plans to file a lawsuit. What did they say? You were there at the rally.
Yes, this was held by William Barber. He is obviously someone who's been involved in liberal progressive politics in North Carolina for a long time. A decade ago, he was leading the Moral Monday marches and the HK on J protests that brought hundreds of thousands of people marching in the streets of Raleigh against the Republican legislature. He led the NAACP for several years. He now leads a group called Repairers of the Breach. And it was with that group that he came back to the legislature and promised that he will be filing some legal challenges against these lawsuits. The details of that haven't been made public yet. We're expecting that to happen probably within the next week or so. But he was very clear that he believes these are racially motivated, unconstitutional maps, and he hopes that courts agree.
Meanwhile, there is a separate legal challenge that has already made its way into the court. That happened late Thursday. Tell us about that one.
Yes. Well, as I mentioned, the Republicans already redrew the districts back in 2023, and they've been facing lawsuits over those districts over racial gerrymandering again. And what we saw was that the plaintiffs in one of those challenges, which is still ongoing, have now sought approval and won that approval from the judge in that case to change their argument, to update it, to include this new map. And that's a little bit of a tricky case to figure out what's going to happen, because it actually already went to trial. And that was several months ago. It had its trial, but the judge hasn't actually ruled on that yet. But the judge did say after these maps passed, he sent a note to everyone involved and said, hey, what do we do about this? How should I handle this? And so what the plaintiffs in that case said, a group of voters who were suing, alleging that their rights have been violated, they said, well, let's just keep forging ahead. We already did the trial on all the other ones. None of that evidence has changed regarding, districts around the Triad region, here in the Triangle. So all of that is still kind of fair game to be ruled on at some point, potentially soon. But we could probably see that case sort of restart the arguments over this new set of districts in eastern North Carolina that were affected by the change.
Well, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll hear what Republicans have to say and who's expected to run in these new districts. Stick around. Welcome back to the WRAL Daily Download. We're talking with WRAL state government reporter Will Doran about North Carolina's new congressional districts. They were approved on Wednesday. Will, what do Republican leaders have to say about these allegations of illegal gerrymandering?
Well, they say that these maps are definitely gerrymandered, but that is purely political, that they engaged in partisan gerrymandering. They say they did not engage in racial gerrymandering, and the critics are saying that, yes, you did. But that is going to be the key difference, because courts at both the federal and here in North Carolina at the state level have made it pretty clear that you can get away with partisan gerrymandering. If you are a state legislature like North Carolina, where there are few rules guiding your conduct on redistricting, courts have pretty much given you carte blanche to give yourself power and to take power away from the other side. They say that's fair game, but what you can't do is impede on the rights of racial minorities. And so that is really going to be what all of these lawsuits come down to. There could be some other arguments that we see get thrown out there, but I mean, that is really the main thing. And Republicans have said that they think that they're going to win and prevail because they think they did this and can prove that they did this for purely political and non-racial reasons.
Now, you reported that nevertheless, Republicans seem to be bracing for these legal challenges. What gave you that impression? What did you observe down at the State House last week?
Well, every time a Republican state lawmaker got up to talk about this, which was pretty rare, the vast majority of them had absolutely nothing to say about it, voted on it with little debate. But the few people who did talk all gave heavily scripted speeches. They were almost verbatim. It was a few different people talking, but what they had to say was almost exactly the same as what everyone else said. And, we've seen in the past in these lawsuits that their words will be quoted in court and used in these lawsuits to say, well, hey, you said you were doing this for X, Y, and Z reasons. And so, we can kind of look at your motivations for that. So they've had their lawyers very carefully script out exactly how they're going to describe these maps. And so it was interesting to see them stand up and say, we are doing this because Donald Trump asked us to give Republicans an advantage, and we want to do whatever we can do to give Republicans an advantage. And they kept hammering that point about this was all pure partisan. It's for Trump. It's to help out the Republican Party. And they said we did not use any racial data. Now, Democrats countered, well, this map is targeting Don Davis, who is one of the state's few black members of Congress. You're accomplishing this by targeting his district, which is the most heavily black district in the state. And you're doing it by taking thousands of black voters out of his district and replacing them with white voters. And that is turning the district more Republican. And they say, well, that is just pure coincidence because we did not use any racial data. Democrats are highly skeptical of those claims, but we'll have to wait on these lawsuits to figure out who's right.
Now, WRAL had a chance to actually hear from Davis last week. What did he have to say?
Well, he's obviously frustrated with the process, but he indicated that, he may still run again. He wasn't fully committal on this, but he did keep talking about, when I'm going to be running, this will be my third map. And he's run for re-election. If he runs in 2026, it'll be his third election and also his third different district that he's running under. I mean, we constantly have been redrawing the maps in North Carolina. This is our 7th different congressional map in the last 9 years. So, folks out there, if you don't really know who represents you for Congress, well, the maps have been changing a lot. It's a good chance that it's someone different than the last time you checked. And so he's upset about this. He believes that it's also distracting from everything that's going on in D.C. because while we're sitting here talking about redistricting, we're not talking about the policy fights that are, behind the government shutdown, behind, fights over tariffs, things like that. And he says he wants to be focused on those things rather than just talking politics.
We're not sure about him running yet. Do we know who is running in these districts now that they're redrawn?
Well, there's a question for Davis as to if he is going to run again, which district he runs in, because this changed 2 different districts in eastern North Carolina, and it actually drew his house out of his district. Now, for Congress, you don't actually have to live in your district. You just have to live somewhere in the state to run for U.S. House. And so he could choose to run for his current district, which he no longer lives in, or he could choose to run for the district which he now lives in, which is represented by Republican Greg Murphy of Greenville. And both the districts are, fairly leaning Republican. The partisan balance is about the same in both places. They favor Republican, but, in a big big wave election, maybe a Democrat could have a chance. And Davis is a pretty moderate guy. So he could potentially look at either district. Murphy has confirmed that he will be running for re-election in his current district, even though he has expressed some displeasure that he lost all of the Outer Banks. He has a beach house in the Outer Banks. There's obviously a lot of wealthy political donors who live in the Outer Banks. Those are all now in the district that Davis currently represents. And so he's not too happy about that decision, but he's not going to move districts. So the question is going to be, for the newly drawn first district, northeastern North Carolina, who's going to jump into that GOP primary, especially now that it is no longer a competitive seat. It's going to definitely favor whichever Republican wins the Republican primary. So we know that State Senator Bobby Hanig is going to run for that. Rocky Mount Mayor Sandy Robertson has previously said that he's interested in running. I don't believe that we've heard from him since the lines have been redrawn, but he was definitely in the old district, and Rocky Mount is still in that district. We've also heard from Kinston, Lenoir County Commissioner, actually, Eric Rouse, who's thinking of running as well. But Lenoir County also got drawn out of that district, so we'll see if he's still going to run for that. And like I said, now that it looks much more favorable to a Republican, we could also see some bigger names jump into that race as well.
Now, North Carolina isn't the only state doing this, and as Republicans talked about it, they said they feared that Democratic states might do it, and lo and behold, last week, Virginia Democrats said they're going to look at redrawing Virginia's congressional maps. Tell us about that one.
Yes, this is all a fight, and all these different states are just aiming to maximize power for their own party and blaming it on the other side. We heard a very fiery speech from the House Majority Leader here, Brendan Jones, when he was rolling out this map in the House. He said, "The reason we're here is because of California and the radical left are redrawing their maps." Now, California hasn't redrawn their maps. They said that they might redraw their maps because of Texas having already redrawn theirs. But, Republicans are regardless saying, we're doing this because of California. And now Virginia is coming in and say, well, if North Carolina is doing it, we're going to do it back. And we think that even though, North Carolina is only getting rid of one Democrat, we think we in Virginia can get rid of 2 or 3 Republicans. So they're hopeful that they can actually not only cancel out North Carolina, but actually make the national map even more favorable to Democrats. And so it's just kind of this chain reaction. And, there's plenty of other states involved in this. Indiana, Ohio, Louisiana, Maryland, Illinois, possibly. I mean, it could just be this continuous domino effect over the coming months. And, as every state on both sides seeks to really just maximize power for themselves.
Well, it's going to be very interesting to see how this all plays out, both in the courts and with our neighbors to the north. Thanks, Will.
Thank you.
That's WRAL State Government reporter Will Doran. For all of his coverage of North Carolina's new congressional districts, go to the NC Capitol section of WRAL.com. I'm Jack Hagel. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for listening to the WRAL Daily Download and for making us part of your morning routine. Another great way to get WRAL news is the Morning Briefing newsletter. It's a daily email with Triangle news, events, and headlines to help you get ready for the day. Sign up at WRAL.com/newsletter.